President Vladimir Putin has said that the coming decade will be the most dangerous since the end of World War II. Putin further accused the West of inciting war in Ukraine, saying nations were playing a dangerous and dirty game.
We stand at a historical frontier. Ahead is probably the most dangerous, unpredictable, but also important decade since the end of the Second World War.
Putin's remarks also come at a time when the Pentagon has warned of acute threats from Russia, but outlined that China is the most consequential challenge for America.
The NDS bluntly describes Russia as an acute threat, and we chose the word acute carefully. Unlike China, Russia can't systemically challenge the United States over the long term. But Russian aggression does pose an immediate and sharp threat to our interests and values.
And as the war continues, Russian-installed authorities in the Donetsk region say Ukrainian shelling has set fuel tanks at the town's railway station and oil depot on fire.
In the area of the train station, there were 4 cisterns found burning. The second fire was confirmed there. At the moment, there are 35 firefighters and 6 fire trucks are fighting the fire there.
Meanwhile, in the Donetsk region, Ukrainian soldiers are holding their position against Russian personnel on the outskirts of the eastern city of Bakhmut. Russian forces are continuing to bombard the Donetsk region while making slow gains towards the centre.
Their main aim is to capture the Donetsk region, to have any big success and to show they can do at least something. But they still haven't managed to do this. This area is full of them, and they move back and forth all the time.
Well, we're joined now by Glenn L. Carl, who is a former CIA officer and national security and foreign policy expert. He's coming to us live from Boston in the United States just now. Glenn, can you just give us a bit of, background information, I suppose, in terms of what President Putin has said, that we're heading towards the most dangerous decade since World War II. Can you just give some context about that? What does he mean, and is the US worried?
Well, it's always a challenge to place in context comments from a Russian leader, because they are, I don't say this as a partisan, I really do not, they are so aggressive in their use of disinformation and deception. However, clearly what he's touching upon, at least, is that in part by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but really from larger tectonic shifts, the international system is shifting. The United States is no longer the only superpower. China has continued its rise and is a near peer competitor and continues to become more powerful. So the international system is less stable. The invasion of Ukraine further destabilizes this. Russia has a fundamentally different conception of how the international system should work. It would like, and is working to create, and with some success in Ukraine, a sphere of influence international system where Russia has predominance in Central Europe, really, and other places. And the United States no longer sets universal norms that nations need to respect. So if the United States does not accept this evolution, then the world becomes a dangerous place, because Russia has thousands of nuclear weapons, China has its own demands, and the United States cannot impose its will. So he's correct that it is fraught, but he is the agent of some of the danger.
What is the West's option then? We've obviously got NATO So that sees the allies there coming together to try to decide on defence spending, trying to decide where to place NATO personnel as well. But is this sort of tipping of the balance going to restructure a lot of NATO principles? Will the West have to tighten itself even more? And could it actually increase tensions dramatically moving forward rather than seeing any way of de-escalating these tensions?
Well, the last part first, perhaps. Will tensions increase even more? Will the situation become more dangerous? That depends on, we don't know the answer. It quite possibly could be yes, but it is not necessarily yes. And it does depend on the responses to the first parts of your questions. We're living in a world closer to 1913 than 1990 or 2010 even, where the balance of power is the complicated multi-variable equation will determine international stability or not, rather than the much simpler world that we lived in. Not to say that it was simple or not dangerous, but the simpler world we have lived in since 1945 until about 2015. So yes, it does require a strengthening of alliances in NATO, a counterbalancing of powers, and I think, as we all know, an equilibrium is the hardest state of nature to sustain. Materials and human beings in international systems try to resolve themselves to simpler structures or more fixed structures, and that is fraught with danger. It is true. And I don't want to let Vladimir Putin off the hook. Invading a country that is sovereign and then repeatedly threatening nuclear war because you don't get your way is unfortunately like a 7-year-old stamping his foot, except that happened with thousands of nuclear weapons. And we are, yes, Putin, however, is correct, in a progressively more fraught moment.
Glenn Elkal, a former CIA officer and national security and foreign policy expert, thank you so much for your time and for joining us from the United States.